There are stories so impossible that most people dismiss them as fiction. But if you're someone who believes that miracles are documented reality, not fairy tales, then what I'm about to share will change everything you think you know about the power of eternal love. Marcus Thompson was kneeling on his front lawn at 7:24 a.m., staring at an envelope that shouldn't exist. Inside his vintage lavender mailbox, next to the letter he'd just written to his deceased wife Luna, was a response written in her unmistakable handwriting. Luna had been dead for exactly 127 days. The cream-colored paper felt warm against his trembling fingers. And when he opened it, the faint scent of her white tea perfume made his knees buckle. The letter began with "My darling Marcus" in the same elegant script that had signed their wedding certificate, complete with the tiny hearts she always drew over her eyes instead of dots. But this wasn't a message of comfort or closure. Luna's letter contained 3 specific predictions about events that would unfold in the next 72 hours. Events so detailed and impossible to guess that they would either prove his grief had finally driven him insane, or confirm that love truly is stronger than death itself. The first prediction involved his sister Rachel calling tomorrow at exactly 2:47 p.m., with devastating news about their father's sudden collapse. The second described a job offer from a Seattle company he'd never contacted, arriving Thursday morning from a woman named Jennifer Walsh through a chain of connections he couldn't possibly know about. The third prediction was the most impossible of all: a chance encounter on Friday evening with a stranger in a yellow cashmere scarf who would share her own story of impossible communication with the dead. As Marcus read Luna's final words, "This is only the beginning, my love. What's coming next will save lives," he realized he was holding either the first piece of evidence that consciousness survives death, or the product of a mind completely shattered by loss. Within 48 hours, he would know which one was true. What Marcus discovered next would not only prove that some love stories transcend the grave, but would turn his quiet Oregon neighborhood into the center of miracles that medical experts still cannot explain. To understand the miracle that was about to unfold in Salem, Oregon, you need to know about the love story that started it all. Marcus Thompson met Luna Hartwell on a rainy Thursday in March at a small coffee shop called The Daily Grind, where she was sitting alone at a corner table, sketching intricate patterns in the margins of a medical journal. Her honey blonde hair fell in soft waves over her shoulder as she concentrated, completely absorbed in her art. Marcus had walked into that coffee shop because his laptop battery had died, and he needed somewhere to finish a logo design for a local bakery. But the moment he saw Luna, work became impossible. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater that made her green eyes look like emeralds. And when she looked up from her sketching to meet his gaze, the entire world seemed to shift on its axis. Their first conversation lasted for hours. Luna was a pediatric nurse at Salem General Hospital, and her sketches weren't random doodles, but intricate mandalas she drew to calm her mind after difficult shifts. She told Marcus that children's hospitals were places where miracles and heartbreak live side by side, and that drawing these sacred geometric patterns helped her process the intense emotions of watching tiny humans fight for their lives every day. Marcus shared his passion for graphic design and his dream of creating art that told stories. He showed her his portfolio on his phone, and Luna studied each piece with the same intensity she'd given to her medical journal. When she looked at his logo for a local animal rescue, her eyes filled with tears. "You capture the essence of hope," she whispered. "That's the rarest gift an artist can have." Their courtship was a symphony of small miracles. Luna would leave tiny origami hearts in Marcus's jacket pockets, each one folded from pages of old medical textbooks she no longer needed. Marcus would surprise her with hand-lettered quotes about healing and compassion, beautifully designed and framed for her apartment walls. They discovered they both loved old movies from the 1940s, preferred tea over coffee despite meeting in a coffee shop, and shared an irrational fear of butterflies that made them both laugh until their stomachs hurt. 6 months after that first meeting, Marcus proposed to Luna in the same corner of the Daily Grind where they'd met. He had designed a custom engagement ring with a vintage setting that reminded him of the delicate mandala patterns she loved to draw. When Luna saw the ring, she gasped and covered her mouth with both hands. "Marcus Thompson," she said through happy tears, "you are going to make me the luckiest woman alive." Their wedding was held in Luna's parents' backyard in the small town of Silverton, just outside Salem. They exchanged vows under a massive oak tree that Luna's grandmother had planted 50 years earlier. Luna wore her grandmother's pearl necklace and a flowing dress that she'd found at a vintage shop in Portland. Marcus wore his father's navy blue suit, altered to fit his taller frame. The ceremony was simple and intimate, with only 37 guests who understood that they were witnessing something rare and sacred. During their vows, Luna promised to love Marcus through every season of life, in sickness and health, in joy and sorrow, until my very last breath and whatever comes after. Marcus promised to be her anchor in storms, her partner in dreams, and her safe harbor for as long as my heart beats and beyond. They had no idea how prophetic those words would become. The 3 years of their marriage were the happiest of Marcus's life. They bought a small blue house on Elm Street with a wraparound porch and a yard perfect for the garden Luna had always dreamed of planting. Luna painted their mailbox a soft lavender color and planted matching lavender bushes around it because she said it would make coming home feel like walking into a hug. Every morning at exactly 7:23 a.m., Luna would kiss Marcus goodbye before leaving for her shift at the hospital. She would always say the same thing: "Make beautiful things today, my love, and remember that you're my favorite miracle." Then she would walk to her white Honda Civic, always turning back to wave at Marcus as he stood in their doorway, coffee mug in hand, watching the love of his life drive away. Their evening routine was equally sacred. Luna would arrive home around 6:30 p.m., often emotionally drained from her work with sick children, and Marcus would have dinner waiting. Not elaborate meals, just simple comfort food that they would eat while Luna told him stories about her young patients. She had a gift for seeing the beauty in even the most heartbreaking situations. And her stories helped Marcus understand that healing was as much about hope as it was about medicine. On weekends, they would drive to the Oregon coast and walk along the beaches near Lincoln City, collecting smooth stones and pieces of sea glass that Luna would arrange in mason jars throughout their house. Marcus would bring his sketchbook, and Luna would bring her medical journals to study. But mostly, they would just sit on driftwood logs and talk about their dreams. Luna wanted to eventually specialize in pediatric oncology because she believed that children facing cancer needed nurses who understood that laughter could be as powerful as chemotherapy. Marcus dreamed of opening his own design studio, where he could create art for nonprofit organizations that were changing the world. They talked often about having children of their own. Luna would make an incredible mother, Marcus knew, because she had an innate ability to make any child feel seen and valued. They had chosen names: Oliver James for a boy, Sophia Grace for a girl. Luna had already started a hope chest filled with tiny clothes and blankets, each piece chosen with the careful attention she gave to everything she loved. Their love was the kind that made other people believe in soulmates. Friends would joke that Marcus and Luna were so connected they could finish each other's sentences, but it was deeper than that. They seemed to operate on the same emotional frequency, always knowing what the other needed without having to ask. When Luna had a particularly hard day at the hospital, Marcus would somehow know to have her favorite chamomile tea waiting. When Marcus was struggling with a difficult design project, Luna would appear with exactly the right words of encouragement. February 14, 2024, was supposed to be their third Valentine's Day as a married couple. Marcus had planned a surprise picnic in their living room, complete with fairy lights strung from the ceiling and olive. Luna's favorite foods spread out on their grandmother's quilt. He had spent weeks designing a custom piece of art that captured the story of their love, from that first meeting at the daily grind to their dreams of the future they were building together. Luna never made it home that day. At 11:42 a.m., while she was checking on a 7-year-old boy recovering from heart surgery, Luna suddenly grabbed her head and collapsed to the hospital floor. The brain aneurysm that killed her was what doctors called a thunderclap. A catastrophic rupture that gave no warning and offered no chance of survival. She was gone before the paramedics could even get her to the emergency room. Dr. Martinez, Luna's supervisor, called Marcus at 12:17 p.m. The words, "I'm so sorry." But Luna didn't make. It echoed in Marcus's mind like a broken record as he dropped the phone and sank to his knees in their kitchen. The fairy lights he had hung for their romantic evening seemed to mock him as they twinkled cheerfully above the picnic that would never happen. The funeral was a blur of flowers and condolences that felt surreal. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects to Luna, including dozens of families whose children she had cared for during their darkest hours. A mother whose twin daughters had survived premature birth told Marcus, "Your wife saved my babies' lives, but more than that, she saved our hope. She made us believe in miracles again." After everyone went home and the flowers began to wilt, Marcus was left alone in their blue house with a lavender mailbox, surrounded by reminders of a love story that had been cut short just as it was reaching its most beautiful chapters. The silence was deafening. The empty space in their bed felt like a black hole that threatened to swallow him whole. That's when Marcus started writing the letters. 6 months after Luna's death, on a morning when the grief felt so heavy he could barely breathe. He sat down at their kitchen table with a piece of Luna's favorite cream-colored stationery and wrote his first letter to heaven. He told her about the cardinal that had started visiting their oak tree, how her lavender bushes were blooming more beautifully than ever, and how much he missed hearing her voice say, "Make beautiful things today, my love." Writing to Luna became his lifeline. Every morning at 7:23 a.m., he would pour his heart onto paper and walk to their lavender mailbox, placing each letter inside like a prayer sent directly to heaven. Neighbors thought he had lost his mind, but Marcus knew better. Love like theirs didn't just disappear when someone's heart stopped beating. It had to go somewhere, and if Luna was somewhere, then maybe, somehow, she could still hear him. If you're still with me at this point, it means you're exactly the kind of person who understands that reality is far more magical than we've been taught. There's a growing community of us here who recognize that these aren't coincidences, but miracles waiting to be acknowledged. Subscribe to this channel because what happens next in Marcus's story is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about the boundaries between life and death. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single detail of how this impossible transformation unfolds. The morning after Marcus found Luna's letter, he woke up at 4:17 a.m. with his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. He had spent the entire night reading and rereading those impossible words, analyzing every curve of Luna's handwriting under his desk lamp like a forensic expert searching for proof of forgery. But every letter, every flourish, every tiny heart dotting the I's was undeniably hers. Marcus made coffee with shaking hands, using Luna's favorite lavender honey mug because holding something she had touched made him feel less like he was losing his sanity. The house felt different somehow, charged with an energy that made the air itself seem to shimmer. Even Shadow, their gray tabby cat, who had been listless and withdrawn since Luna's death, was behaving strangely. The cat kept staring at empty corners of the room, purring softly as if someone invisible was scratching behind his ears. At exactly 7:23 a.m., Marcus walked to the mailbox with letter number 129, his hands trembling so violently he could barely grip the pen he'd used to write it. This letter was different from all the others. Instead of sharing the mundane details of his grief-stricken days, he had written a direct response to Luna's impossible message. "If this is really you," he had written, "then prove it. Show me something that only you would know. Something that would make even the biggest skeptic believe." As he placed the letter in the mailbox, Marcus noticed something that made his breath catch in his throat. The lavender bushes around the mailbox, which had been dormant since winter, were suddenly bursting with new growth despite the fact that it was only early March. Tiny purple buds were forming on branches that had been bare and lifeless just yesterday. In Oregon's climate, lavender typically didn't bloom until late spring. Yet here were dozens of premature blossoms releasing their distinctive fragrance into the crisp morning air. Marcus spent the day in a state of suspended disbelief. watching the clock like a man waiting for his execution. Luna's letter had predicted that Rachel would call at exactly 2:47 p.m. with news about their father's health crisis. Marcus had called his sister that morning, trying to sound casual as he asked about Dad's well-being. Rachel had laughed and said their father was in perfect health, probably out on his morning run as they spoke. At 2:46 p.m., Marcus was sitting in his home office, staring at his phone with sweaty palms. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. 2 hours 46 minutes and 50 seconds. 2 hours 46 minutes and 55 seconds. 2 hours 47 minutes and 0 seconds. His phone remained silent. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Part of him wanted Luna's predictions to be wrong, because that would mean he wasn't losing his mind. But a larger part desperately needed them to be true, because that would mean love really could transcend death. At 2 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds, his phone exploded with Rachel's ringtone. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the device as he answered. "Marcus?" Rachel's voice was thick with tears and panic. "I'm at the grocery store and Dad just collapsed. They're loading him into an ambulance right now." His heart stopped beating for almost 30 seconds before the paramedics got it started again. "We're heading to Portland General Hospital." The world tilted sideways. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. What happened? Was he having chest pains? Any warning signs? Nothing. Rachel sobbed. He was reaching for a box of cereal and just crumpled to the floor. The paramedic said it looks like a massive heart attack, but Dad's been healthy his whole life. This doesn't make sense. Marcus's mind raced back to Luna's letter. She had predicted not just that their father would collapse, but that the doctors wouldn't understand the real cause until they ran a specific test. "Rachel, listen to me very carefully. When you get to the hospital, you need to ask them to test Dad for something called Brugada syndrome. Tell them to do a specialized EKG that looks for specific heart rhythm patterns." "What? Marcus, how do you know about that? I've never even heard of Brugada syndrome." "Just trust me, please. Ask for Dr. Sarah Chen in cardiology and tell her you need the Brugada protocol. Say those exact words." Rachel was quiet for a moment, probably wondering if grief had finally broken her brother's brain. "Okay, Marcus, I'll ask for Dr. Chen and the Brugada protocol. Can you meet us at the hospital? I'm leaving right now." As Marcus drove the 45 minutes to Portland General Hospital, his mind was reeling with questions that had no rational answers. How could Luna have known about a medical condition that Marcus had never heard of? How could she have predicted the exact time of their father's collapse? And most impossibly, how could she have known the name of a specific cardiologist at a hospital she had never worked at? The cardiac intensive care unit at Portland General was a maze of beeping machines and hushed conversations. Marcus found Rachel in the waiting room, her face streaked with tears and her usually perfect makeup smudged beyond recognition. Their father was stable but unconscious, hooked up to monitors that tracked every beat of his struggling heart. Dr. Sarah Chen was a petite woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes and an air of quiet competence. When Rachel mentioned the Brugada protocol, Dr. Chen's eyebrows shot up in surprise. That's a very specific request. Most people have never heard of Brugada syndrome. "Ah! What made you think to ask for that particular test?" Rachel looked at Marcus helplessly. He couldn't very well explain that his dead wife had provided the medical advice, so he improvised. "Luna, my late wife, was a nurse. She used to talk about rare cardiac conditions that could cause sudden collapse in apparently healthy people." Dr. Chen nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry for your loss. Your wife was right to be concerned about Brugada syndrome. It's a genetic condition that can cause sudden cardiac death, and it's often missed in standard testing. We'll run the specialized EKG immediately." 2 hours later, Dr. Chen returned with results that confirmed the impossible. "Your father does indeed have Brugada syndrome. It's a rare genetic condition that affects the heart's electrical system. Without proper treatment, patients have a high risk of sudden cardiac death. The fact that you knew to ask for this specific test may have saved his life. Marcus felt like he was drowning in disbelief. Luna's first prediction hadn't just come true. It had potentially saved their father's life. As he sat in the hospital waiting room, watching machines keep his father alive, he realized that something far beyond his understanding was happening. Either he was experiencing the most elaborate grief-induced hallucination in medical history, or Luna was somehow communicating with him from beyond death itself. That night, Marcus returned home to find a second letter waiting in the lavender mailbox. This one was shorter, but no less impossible. "My darling Marcus," it read, "I know you're scared and confused, but you're not losing your mind. Dad is going to be fine because you listened to me. Tomorrow morning at 9:15 a.m., your phone will ring with the second sign I promised. A woman named Jennifer Walsh from Cascade Creative Studios in Seattle will offer you a position you never applied for, working on a project that will change how people think about healing and hope. Say yes, my love. This is the beginning of your new purpose." The letter was signed with the same intertwined hearts, but this time Luna had added a small drawing of a cardinal perched on a branch. Marcus looked out their kitchen window to see the red bird sitting in their oak tree, its bright feathers almost glowing in the porch light. The cardinal tilted its head and looked directly at Marcus, as if it was delivering a message of its own. As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he realized that his entire understanding of life and death was about to be shattered forever. Marcus spent the sleepless hours before dawn researching Cascade Creative Studios on his laptop, his coffee growing cold as he scoured the internet for any trace of the company Luna had mentioned. The search results were confusing and contradictory. The company existed, but their website was sparse, showing only a minimalist logo and a single line, creating hope through visual storytelling. There were no employee directories, no client testimonials, no portfolio of work that would explain why they might contact him. At 9:14 a.m., Marcus was sitting at his kitchen table, staring at his phone with the same intensity he'd once reserved for watching Luna sleep. His hands were clammy with nervous sweat, and his heart was beating so fast he wondered if he was having his own cardiac episode. Shadow the cat was perched on the windowsill, tail twitching as he watched the cardinal that had become a permanent resident of their oak tree. At exactly 9:15 a.m., his phone rang. The caller ID showed a Seattle area code he didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Marcus Thompson?" The voice was warm and professional, with just a hint of excitement. "This is Jennifer Walsh from Cascade Creative Studios. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." Marcus's throat felt like sandpaper. "No, this is a perfect time. How can I help you?" "I'm calling because we'd like to offer you a position as Senior Art Director for a very special project we're launching. I know this might seem unusual since you didn't apply for the position, but your portfolio came to our attention through Dr. Martinez at Salem General Hospital. He spoke very highly of your work to his brother-in-law, who happens to be my business partner." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Marcus gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Dr. Martinez at Salem General. I'm not sure I understand the connection." Jennifer's voice took on a gentler tone. "Dr. Martinez mentioned that you were married to Luna Thompson, one of our most beloved pediatric nurses. He said your wife used to show her colleagues examples of your design work, and that you had created some beautiful pieces for local nonprofits. When our company decided to launch a project focused on healing art for children's hospitals, your name came up immediately." Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. Luna had been talking about his work to her colleagues, sharing his art with people who understood the power of visual beauty in healing environments. She had been planting seeds for opportunities she somehow knew he would need, even after she was gone. "The project," Jennifer continued, "involves creating a series of interactive digital art installations for pediatric oncology wards across the Pacific Northwest. We want to use technology and design to create immersive experiences that help children feel brave, hopeful, and connected to something larger than their illness. The position would be remote initially, with occasional trips to Seattle for team meetings. The synchronicity was staggering. Luna had always dreamed of specializing in pediatric oncology because she believed children facing cancer needed extra doses of hope and wonder. Now, Marcus was being offered a chance to create art that would serve those same children Luna had wanted to help. "I'm very interested," Marcus managed to say, his voice barely steady. "When would you need an answer? Actually, if you're available, we'd love to have you start next week. I know it's sudden, but we just received funding approval for the project, and we're eager to begin. The salary is $90,000 annually, plus full benefits and a signing bonus to help with any relocation expenses if you decide to move to Seattle eventually." After ending the call, Marcus sat in stunned silence, staring at the phone in his hands. Luna's second prediction had come true with impossible precision. Not only had Jennifer Walsh called at exactly 9:15 a.m., but the job offer was connected to Luna's work, Luna's dreams, and Luna's belief that art could heal wounded souls. That evening, Marcus received a call from Rachel with updates about their father's condition. The Brugade syndrome diagnosis had led to the immediate implantation of a cardioverter defibrillator, a device that would monitor his heart rhythm and deliver life-saving shocks if dangerous arrhythmias occurred. The doctor said the device would likely add 20 to 30 years to his life. "Marcus," Rachel said, her voice filled with wonder, "how did you know to ask about Brugada syndrome? The cardiologist said that without that specific test, Dad could have had another cardiac event within weeks, and the next one might have been fatal." Marcus couldn't tell his sister the truth, so he repeated the story about Luna's medical knowledge. But privately, he was grappling with the realization that Luna's letter hadn't just predicted the future, okay? It had actively changed it. Her message had provided information that saved their father's life and opened a door to a career opportunity that seemed designed specifically for Marcus's skills and Luna's dreams. Friday evening arrived with a crisp clarity that made every color seem more vivid, every sound more distinct. Marcus found himself at the Starbucks on Lancaster Drive at 6:30 p.m., not because he particularly wanted coffee, but because some invisible force seemed to be guiding his steps. He ordered his usual medium coffee with cream and stood in line, feeling foolish for believing that a woman in a yellow cashmere scarf would somehow materialize and bump into him at exactly 6:33 p.m. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. 6:31, 6:32, 6:33. Marcus was beginning to think that Luna's third prediction would be the one that finally proved his grief. Had created an elaborate fantasy when he felt a gentle collision from behind. Hot coffee splashed across his jacket as a woman in an elegant, yellow cashmere scarf turned around with horror written across her face. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry." The woman was probably in her early 70s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and kind blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence. "I was reaching for extra napkins and completely lost my balance. Please let me buy you a new coffee and pay for your dry cleaning." Marcus stared at her in shock, unable to speak. The woman was exactly as Luna had described. Yellow cashmere scarf, apologetic demeanor, the immediate offer to replace his coffee. The coincidence was so precise, it felt like a scene from a movie where reality and the supernatural collided. "It's really no problem," Marcus finally managed. "Accidents happen." "No, I insist. I'm Eleanor Whitman, and I absolutely cannot live with myself if I don't make this right." As they waited for Marcus's replacement coffee, Eleanor studied his face with the penetrating gaze of someone who had learned to read human emotions with surgical precision. "You look like someone who's carrying a very heavy burden. I recognize that expression because I wore it for 3 years after my husband passed away." Marcus's heart began to race. This was the moment Luna had predicted, the conversation that would help him understand what was happening between them. "I lost my wife 7 months ago. Some days I feel like I'm drowning in grief." Eleanor's expression softened with compassion. "What was her name?" "Luna. Luna Thompson." Luna is a beautiful name. It means moon, doesn't it? The moon is never really gone, you know? Even when we can't see it, it's still there, still influencing the tides, still pulling at the earth with invisible force. Eleanor paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "Can I share something with you that might sound impossible?" Marcus nodded, his mouth too dry to speak. "After my husband Harold died, I thought communication between us was over forever. But 6 months later, I started receiving messages from him. Not dramatic supernatural events, mind you, but small signs that were too specific and too meaningful to be coincidences. A song playing on the radio at exactly the moment I needed to hear it. Flowers blooming out of season in the exact spot where we had our first kiss. License plates with combinations of numbers that spelled out words only Harold would know mattered to me." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. The skeptics would say it was wishful thinking, pattern recognition, the grieving mind creating meaning where none existed. But after 3 years of documented experiences that defied logical explanation, I've come to believe that love creates connections that death cannot sever. Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to leap into an abyss that would either destroy him or teach him to fly. Have you ever received actual written communication? Like letters or messages in handwriting you recognized? Eleanor's eyes widened with surprise and something that looked like recognition. You've experienced something like that, haven't you? I don't know if I should tell you. You'll think I've lost my mind. Marcus, Eleanor said gently. I've been waiting 3 years for someone who would understand what I'm about to show you. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather journal. She opened it to a page filled with handwriting that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. The writing was different from Luna's, more angular and masculine, but the impossible reality was the same. This appeared in Harold's desk drawer 6 months after he died, Eleanor whispered. It was written in his handwriting, on paper from a notepad he had used for grocery lists. The message told me where to find important financial documents I didn't know existed. Warned me about a problem with our house's foundation that would have cost thousands to repair if not caught early, and gave me the courage to start volunteering at the animal shelter where I met some of the best friends of my life. Marcus stared at the journal entry, his hands trembling. Do other people know about this? I've shared my story with a few people over the years. There is a small group of us who meet monthly at the Unity Church on Oak Street. We call ourselves the Continuing Love Circle. We're people who have experienced communication with deceased loved ones that goes beyond what mainstream science considers possible. Eleanor handed Marcus a small card with meeting information written in her careful script. We meet every second Tuesday at 7 p.m. It's a safe space to share experiences that the outside world might not understand. If you'd like to come, you'd be very welcome. As Marcus walked to his car that evening, clutching Eleanor's card and feeling like his entire worldview had been rebuilt from the ground up, he realized that Luna's third prediction had done more than prove her ability to see the future. It had connected him with people who understood that grief could be a bridge rather than a wall, that love could be a living force rather than just a memory. That night, Marcus found a 4th letter waiting in the lavender mailbox. This one was longer than the previous 3, written on both sides of the cream-colored paper in Luna's careful script. The message would prepare him for the most important challenge of his new reality. Luna's 4th letter was unlike anything Marcus had received before. The handwriting seemed more urgent, the words flowing across the page with an energy that made the paper feel almost alive in his hands. As he read by the light of their kitchen lamp, with shadow curring in his lap and the cardinal visible in the oak tree despite the darkness, Marcus realized that everything that had happened so far was just preparation for what was coming next. My dearest Marcus, the letter began. I know these messages have shaken your understanding of reality. But I need you to stay strong because what I'm about to ask of you will require more courage than you think you possess. You are about to become an instrument of healing for others, just as these letters have been instruments of healing for you. The letter went on to explain that Marcus would receive what Luna called guidance assignments that would help him save lives and restore hope in ways that seemed impossible. The first assignment involved their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who had been acting increasingly forgetful and confused over the past few weeks. According to Luna's letter, Mrs. Patterson had a gas leak in her basement that was slowly poisoning her with carbon monoxide, causing symptoms that everyone was attributing to early dementia. Tomorrow morning at exactly 10:30 a.m., Luna wrote, "Mrs. Patterson will be in her garden, and you need to find a reason to visit her basement. Tell her you're concerned about a chemical smell that might be coming from your shared property line. The gas leak is behind her hot water heater, and if it's not fixed within the next week, she will lose consciousness while cooking dinner next Friday and leave her stove on. The resulting house fire will destroy 3 homes and injure 7 people." Marcus read this section twice, his heart pounding with the weight of responsibility. Luna was asking him to prevent a disaster that would affect multiple families, but doing so would require him to act on information he couldn't possibly explain. How could he tell Mrs. Patterson about a gas leak without revealing that his dead wife had warned him about it? The letter continued with even more impossible guidance. Luna provided specific lottery numbers that would win exactly $57,000 in the Oregon Megabucks drawing scheduled for the following Wednesday. She explained that this money wasn't for Marcus's personal use, but was intended to pay for an experimental cardiac treatment that would extend their father's life by decades. The treatment is called cardiac ablation therapy, and it's only available at one clinic in San Francisco, Luna wrote. Insurance won't cover it because it's still considered experimental, but the procedure will eliminate Dad's need for the defibrillator and give him a completely normal life expectancy. The lottery tickets should be purchased at Murphy's Corner Store on State Street at exactly 2:17 p.m. next Tuesday. Ask for quick pick numbers, but if the machine gives you any number sequence that doesn't start with 07, ask for a different ticket. The specificity of Luna's instructions was staggering, but Marcus had learned to trust her impossible knowledge. Everything she had predicted so far had come true with frightening accuracy. His father's collapse had happened at exactly 2:47 p.m. Jennifer Walsh had called at precisely 9:15 a.m. Eleanor had bumped into him wearing a yellow cashmere scarf at 6:33 p.m., just as Luna had foretold. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Luna's death. At 10:25 a.m., he walked outside and pretended to check his mail while keeping an eye on Mrs. Patterson's yard. Right on schedule, the 78-year-old woman emerged from her house wearing gardening gloves and carrying a small trowel. Her movements seemed slower and less coordinated than usual, and Marcus noticed that she kept pausing to steady herself against her rose bushes. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson," Marcus called out, walking toward their shared fence line. "Beautiful day for gardening." "Oh, hello, Marcus." Mrs. Patterson's voice sounded weaker than he remembered, and her usual sharp focus seemed clouded with confusion. "I'm trying to remember what I came out here to do. These days, my mind feels like it's full of cotton." "Mrs. Patterson, I hope you don't mind me asking, but have you noticed any unusual smells lately? I've been detecting what might be a gas or chemical odor that seems to be coming from the direction of your house." Mrs. Patterson frowned and sniffed the air tentatively. "Now that you mention it, I have noticed a strange smell in my basement recently. I thought it might be something wrong with my cleaning supplies. Would you mind if I took a look? Gas leaks can be really dangerous, and I'd hate for either of us to have a problem." 20 minutes later, Marcus was standing in Mrs. Patterson's basement with a gas detector he had borrowed from his neighbor on the other side, watching the device scream warnings as he approached the hot water heater. The gas leak was exactly where Luna had said it would be, a small but steady escape of natural gas from a corroded net fitting that had been slowly filling the basement with potentially lethal fumes. "Mrs. Patterson," Marcus called up the basement stairs. "You need to call the gas company immediately. There's a significant leak down here that needs emergency repair." The gas company technician, who responded to Mrs. Patterson's call, confirmed that the leak was serious enough to have caused unconsciousness within another week of exposure. "Ma'am," the technician told her, "if your neighbor hadn't noticed this problem, you could have been in real danger. Carbon monoxide poisoning from gas leaks like this can cause confusion, memory problems, and eventually loss of consciousness." Mrs. Patterson thanked Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I thought I was developing dementia," she confessed. My children have been talking about moving me to assisted living because I've been so forgetful and dizzy lately. You may have saved my life." That Tuesday afternoon, Kus found himself standing in Murphy's Corner store at 2:15 p.m., feeling ridiculous as he waited for the exact moment Luna had specified. At 2:17 p.m., he approached the counter and asked for a quick Pick Megabucks ticket. The machine generated a sequence starting with 07, 23, 15, 34, 42, 09. Marcus stared at the numbers, recognizing 07 and 23 as the month and day of Luna's birthday. The lottery drawing was broadcast live on Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Marcus sat in his living room with Shadow on his lap, watching the numbered balls tumble in the machine with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. One by one, the winning numbers were called 07, 23, 15, 34, 42, 09. Every single number matched Luna's prediction. Marcus won exactly $57,432 after taxes. The next morning, he called the cardiac clinic in San Francisco that Luna had mentioned in her letter. The experimental ablation therapy she had described was indeed available, cost exactly what Marcus had won, and could be scheduled for their father within 2 weeks. Dr. Patricia Williams, the cardiologist who would perform the procedure, explained that the treatment involved using radiofrequency energy to create tiny scars in the heart tissue that caused abnormal rhythms. This therapy has an 85% success rate for patients with Brugada syndrome, she said. If successful, your father wouldn't need the defibrillator anymore and could live a completely normal life. The night after Marcus made the appointment for his father's treatment, he found the most important letter Luna had ever written waiting in their lavender mailbox. This message contained instructions that would test every ounce of faith and courage he had developed through their impossible correspondence. "My beloved Marcus," the letter read, "everything that has happened between us has been preparing you for this moment. In exactly 37 days, on a Tuesday evening at 6:45 p.m., a young woman named Sarah Chen will be standing on the Golden Gate Bridge, preparing to end her life. Sarah is 28 years old, 6 months pregnant, and convinced that the world would be better without her and her unborn daughter." Marcus's hands began to tremble as he read the details of Luna's final and most crucial assignment. Sarah Chen was Dr. Martinez's niece, a software engineer who had recently lost her job, discovered that her fiancé was stealing money from her savings account, and been diagnosed with a high-risk pregnancy that required expensive medical care she couldn't afford. Sarah will be wearing a blue windbreaker and standing near the middle of the bridge's east walkway, Luna wrote. She will have written goodbye letters to her family and will be clutching an ultrasound photo of her daughter. You need to approach her at exactly 6:47 p.m. and say these exact words. Sarah, your Aunt Luna wants you to know that your daughter is going to change the world, but only if you're brave enough to give her that chance. The letter explained that Marcus would need to travel to San Francisco, ostensibly for his father's medical procedure, but actually to prevent a tragedy that would claim to lives and devastate a family that Luna still felt connected to through her work at the hospital. "This will be my final letter, my love," Luna concluded. "After you save Sarah and her daughter, our communication will end because I will have completed the mission I was sent back to fulfill. But know this, our love will never end. It will live on in the lives you save, the art you create, and the hope you help others discover. You are my miracle, Marcus Thompson, and now you get to be someone else's miracle too." The letter was signed not with Luna's usual intertwined hearts, but with a single word, always. As Marcus folded the letter and pressed it against his chest, he realized that his journey with Luna was about to reach its climax. In 37 days, he would either save 2 lives and prove that love could work miracles across the boundary of death, or discover that grief had finally broken his mind completely. Either way, his life would never be the same. The 37 days between Luna's final letter and the Golden Gate Bridge passed like a strange dream where time moved both too quickly and too slowly. Marcus threw himself into his new position at Cascade Creative Studios, pouring his grief and hope into digital art installations that would help children facing cancer feel connected to magic and possibility. His first project was an interactive wall that responded to touch with bursts of color and light, creating butterflies that danced across the screen in patterns that seemed almost alive. Jennifer Walsh had been right about the project's importance. The children who interacted with Marcus's installations responded with wonder and joy that their parents described as transformative. One 7-year-old girl named Emma, who hadn't smiled since beginning chemotherapy, spent an hour creating digital flowers that bloomed and sparkled under her small hands. Her mother told Marcus through tears that it was the first time Emma had laughed in 3 months. Working on art that brought hope to sick children felt like a continuation of Luna's mission, a way of channeling her compassion for pediatric patients into something tangible and healing. But even as Marcus found purpose in his new work, his mind was constantly focused on the approaching date when he would need to save Sarah Chen's life. Marcus's father underwent the cardiac ablation procedure at the San Francisco clinic exactly 2 weeks before the Golden Gate Bridge appointment. The surgery was performed by Dr. Patricia Williams, whose skilled hands guided radiofrequency energy through microscopic catheters to create precise scars in the heart tissue that had been causing dangerous arrhythmias. The procedure lasted for hours, during which Marcus sat in the waiting room clutching Luna's letters and praying to whatever force had made their impossible communication possible. When Dr. Williams emerged from the operating room with a smile on her face, Marcus knew that Luna's guidance had saved his father's life. "The ablation was completely successful," she announced. "We've eliminated the abnormal electrical pathways that were causing your father's heart rhythm problems. He'll be able to have the defibrillator removed in 6 weeks, and his life expectancy is now completely normal." Marcus's father recovered quickly, his energy and vitality returning as his heart settled into healthy, regular rhythms. But even as he celebrated his father's healing, Marcus was counting down the days until his appointment with Destiny on the Golden Gate Bridge. The night before traveling to San Francisco, Marcus visited Eleanor Whitman and the continuing love circle at Unity Church on Oak Street. The group of 12 people who had experienced communication with deceased loved ones had become a source of strength and understanding that Marcus couldn't find anywhere else. When he shared Luna's final assignment, the group responded with encouragement rather than skepticism. "Love creates miracles," Eleanor said, her wise blue eyes filled with conviction. "Harold guided me to prevent 3 different tragedies through the messages I received from him. You're not losing your mind, Marcus. You're being used as an instrument of divine intervention." A man named Robert, whose deceased son had warned him about a dangerous intersection where multiple accidents would occur, nodded in agreement. "The hardest part is trusting that what seems impossible is actually more real than anything we can see with our physical eyes. But when you save that young woman's life, you'll know with absolute certainty that love truly is eternal." Marcus flew to San Francisco on Monday evening, checking into a hotel near the Golden Gate Bridge with a mixture of anticipation and terror coursing through his veins. He had memorized every detail of Luna's instructions, practicing the exact words he would need to say to Sarah Chen. "Sarah, your Aunt Luna wants you to know that your daughter is going to change the world, but only if you're brave enough to give her that chance." Tuesday evening arrived with a fog so thick that the Golden Gate Bridge seemed to float in a cloud of silver mist. Marcus positioned himself near the bridge's east walkway at 6:30 p.m., wearing a gray jacket and carrying a small backpack that contained copies of all of Luna's letters. His heart was beating so fast, he wondered if he might need cardiac intervention himself. At exactly 6:43 p.m., Marcus spotted a young woman walking slowly toward the middle of the bridge. She was wearing a blue windbreaker, just as Luna had predicted, and her movements had the deliberate, disconnected quality of someone who had already said goodbye to the world in her mind. Marcus could see that she was carrying something small and white in her left hand. As the woman approached the bridge's center point, Marcus got his first clear look at her face. Sarah Chen was beautiful in the way that grief makes people beautiful, with an ethereal sadness that seemed to glow from within. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held the distant look of someone who had already begun the process of letting go. Marcus watched as Sarah stopped at the bridge railing and pulled out what Luna had said would be there. An ultrasound photo of her unborn daughter. She held the small black and white image up to the fading light, her lips moving in what appeared to be a silent conversation with the baby she was carrying. At 6:47 p.m. exactly, Marcus approached Sarah from behind, his voice gentle but clear enough to be heard over the wind and distant traffic. "Sarah, your Aunt Luna wants you to know that your daughter is going to change the world, but only if you're brave enough to give her that chance." Sarah spun around with shock written across her face, the ultrasound photo clutching against her chest. "What did you just say? How do you know about my Aunt Luna?" Marcus had prepared for this moment, but actually looking into Sarah's desperate eyes made every rehearsed explanation seem inadequate. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I was married to Luna Thompson, who worked at Salem General Hospital. She passed away 8 months ago, but she's been sending me messages to help people she cared about." Sarah's legs seemed to buckle, and she gripped the bridge railing for support. "That's impossible. Aunt Luna died in February. She had a brain aneurysm at the hospital." "I know this sounds insane," Marcus said, stepping closer, but keeping his voice calm and non-threatening. "But Luna has been communicating with me through letters that appear in our mailbox. She predicted that you would be here tonight, wearing a blue windbreaker, holding an ultrasound photo of your daughter. She told me you're 6 months pregnant, that you lost your job in software engineering, and that your fiancé stole money from your savings account." Tears began streaming down Sarah's face as Marcus spoke details that no stranger could possibly know. "She also told me that you've been diagnosed with a high-risk pregnancy that requires medical care you can't afford, and that you've written goodbye letters to your family because you think the world would be better without you and your baby. How could you possibly know all of that?" Sarah whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out Luna's final letter, holding it out for Sarah to see. "This is the last message Luna sent me. She said you're Dr. Martinez's niece, and that your daughter is destined to change the world. But she also said you need to choose to be brave enough to give your daughter that chance." Sarah stared at the letter with wide eyes, recognizing Luna's distinctive handwriting immediately. "That's definitely Aunt Luna's writing. She used to send me birthday cards every year with those same little hearts over the eyes. But this is impossible. People don't communicate from beyond death." "I thought the same thing," Marcus said gently. "But Luna's letters have predicted events that saved my father's life, prevented a gas explosion that would have killed my neighbor, and led me to a job creating healing art for children with cancer. She's been using me to help people, and you're the most important person she sent me to save." Sarah was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. "I can't do this anymore. Everything in my life has fallen apart. I don't have money for the medical care my baby needs, and I can't bring a child into a world where I can't even take care of myself." Marcus felt Luna's presence more strongly in that moment than he had since receiving her first letter. The fog around them seemed to shimmer with golden light, and he could swear he smelled the faint scent of white tea perfume carried on the evening breeze. "Sarah, Luna told me something else in her letter. She said that your daughter will grow up to develop technology that helps children with disabilities communicate with their families. Your baby girl is going to create innovations that will give voices to thousands of children who can't speak. But that can only happen if you choose life tonight." Sarah looked down at the ultrasound photo in her hands, studying the tiny profile of her unborn daughter. "How could Aunt Luna possibly know what my baby will accomplish in the future?" "I don't understand the how," Marcus admitted, "but I've learned to trust the love that makes these miracles possible." "Luna also wanted me to tell you that Dr. Martinez and his wife have been trying to find you for weeks. They want to help with your medical expenses and support you through the pregnancy. Luna said they've been looking for a way to honor her memory, and helping you and your daughter would be the perfect way to do that." As Marcus spoke these words, his phone buzzed with a text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Marcus, this is Dr. Martinez. I don't know how you found my niece, but thank you for calling me. I'm on my way to the bridge right now with my wife. We're going to make sure Sarah and her baby have everything they need." Marcus showed Sarah the text message, watching her face transform from despair to wonder. "You called my uncle. Luna told me to contact him after I found you. She said he and his wife have been praying for a way to help you, but they didn't know how to reach out after everything you've been through." In the distance, Marcus could see Dr. Martinez and his wife hurrying toward them across the bridge, their faces filled with relief and love. Sarah looked from the approaching couple to the ultrasound photo in her hands, and Marcus could see the exact moment when she chose life over death, hope over despair. "If this is really a message from Aunt Luna," Sarah said, pressing the ultrasound photo against her heart, "then maybe my daughter really is meant to be here. Maybe I'm stronger than I think I am." As Dr. Martinez and his wife enveloped Sarah in embraces that seemed to physically pull her back from the edge of the bridge, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion wash over him. Luna's mission was complete. Through love that transcended death itself, she had guided him to save 2 lives and restore a family's hope. That night, Marcus checked the lavender mailbox one final time, but no new letter was waiting for him. Luna's work was finished, and their impossible correspondence had come to an end. But as he stood in their garden, looking up at the full moon that shared his wife's name, Marcus knew that their love story would continue in every life they had touched, every miracle they had made possible, and every moment when hope triumphed over despair. 3 years later, Marcus Thompson stood in the children's oncology ward at Seattle Children's Hospital, watching a 5-year-old girl named Lily interact with his latest digital art installation. Our small hands traced patterns across the interactive wall, creating cascades of butterflies that danced and sparkled in response to her touch. Lily had been undergoing treatment for leukemia for 8 months, but in this moment, her face was radiant with joy and wonder. "Ah, Mr. Marcus," Lily called out, her voice filled with excitement. "Look what I made." The butterflies she had created were forming the shape of a heart, pulsing with gentle golden light that reflected in her bright blue eyes. Marcus smiled, feeling Luna's presence in every pixel of light, every moment of healing his art facilitated. His installations were now featured in 15 children's hospitals across the country, bringing hope and magic to thousands of young patients and their families. The technology he had developed, inspired by Luna's vision of healing through beauty, had become a standard tool in pediatric therapeutic environments. On his desk at Cascade Creative Studios, Marcus kept a framed photo of Sarah Chen holding her 2-year-old daughter, Sophia Grace Chen Martinez. True to Luna's prophecy, Sarah had gone on to develop groundbreaking communication software for children with disabilities. Her company, Luna's Voice Technologies, had already helped over 10,000 children find ways to express themselves and connect with their families. Sarah often said that her daughter's first word had been hope, spoken clear and bright on a morning when sunlight streamed through their kitchen window in a way that reminded her of divine intervention. Dr. Martinez and his wife had not only supported Sarah through her pregnancy, but had legally adopted her as their daughter, giving both Sarah and Sophia the family stability Luna had somehow known they would need. Marcus's father, now 75 and healthier than he had been in decades, spent his retirement volunteering at Salem General Hospital, reading stories to pediatric patients and sharing the wisdom that came from surviving his own medical miracle. Mrs. Patterson, whose memory and vitality had been completely restored after the gas leak repair, had become the neighborhood's unofficial guardian angel, checking on elderly residents and organizing community safety initiatives. She often told people that Marcus Thompson had saved her life, though she never knew the true story of how he had known to look for the dangerous leak. Eleanor Whitman and the Continuing Love Circle had grown into a support network of over 200 people who had experienced communication with deceased loved ones. Their monthly meetings had evolved into workshops that helped newly grieving individuals understand that love creates connections stronger than death. Marcus served as a facilitator, sharing his story with people who needed to know that miracles were not only possible, but documented reality. The lavender mailbox still stood in Marcus's front yard, though no more letters had ever appeared inside. Instead, it had become a symbol of hope for the entire neighborhood. People would sometimes stop to touch its painted surface when they were struggling with loss, and many reported feeling a sense of peace and connection that helped them through their darkest moments. Shadow, now an elderly cat of 15, still sat in the kitchen window every morning, watching the cardinal that continued to visit their oak tree. Marcus had come to understand that the bright red bird was not a supernatural messenger, but simply a beautiful reminder that life persists. Hope endures, and love finds ways to express itself in the ordinary magic of each new day. Marcus had never remarried, not because he was unable to love again, but because his love for Luna had evolved into something that included, rather than excluded, new connections. He had learned that the heart doesn't have limits on its capacity for love. It only has limits on fear. Through Luna's letters, he had discovered that healing comes not from forgetting the dead, but from allowing their love to transform the living. Every evening at sunset, Marcus would sit in their garden among Luna's lavender bushes, now thriving beyond anything she could have imagined when she first planted them. He would tell her about his day, about the children his art had helped heal, about the lives that had been touched by the ripple effects of her miraculous intervention. He knew she couldn't write back anymore, but he also knew she was listening. Her love woven into the fabric of a reality far more magical and interconnected than most people dared to believe. The last thing Marcus did each night before going to sleep was to whisper the same words Luna had written in her final letter: "Love never dies. It only transforms." And in the morning, when sunlight streamed through their bedroom window, and the cardinals sang in the oak tree, and the lavender released its sacred fragrance into the Oregon air, Marcus would wake up grateful for another day to be someone's miracle, to create beauty that heals, and to prove that some love stories truly are eternal. If Marcus Thompson's story has touched something deep within your soul, it's because you recognize a truth that mainstream science hasn't yet learned to measure. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of transcending every boundary we think exists between life and death, between the possible and the impossible. Perhaps you're listening to this story because you've lost someone who meant everything to you. Maybe you felt their presence in ways that logic can't explain, received signs that skeptics would dismiss as coincidence, or experienced moments of connection that felt too real to be imagination. Marcus's journey proves that these experiences aren't products of a grieving mind, but evidence of a reality far more beautiful and interconnected than we've been taught to believe. The letters Luna sent from beyond weren't just messages of love. They were invitations to become instruments of healing in a world that desperately needs more miracles. Every time Marcus acted on Luna's guidance, he discovered that love multiplies when it's shared, that hope grows stronger when it's given away, and that the greatest purpose we can find in our own pain is using it to prevent someone else's suffering. Your loved ones who have passed haven't abandoned you. They've simply graduated to a level of existence where they can see the bigger picture, where they understand that every ending is actually a transformation. Every goodbye is actually until we meet again. They're sending you signs, guidance, and love in ways that are perfectly designed for your unique heart and circumstances. The question isn't whether miracles are real. Marcus's documented story, witnessed by dozens of people and verified by medical professionals, proves that love can work impossibilities when we have the courage to trust what our hearts know to be true. The question is whether you're ready to become someone else's miracle, to let your love transform not just your own healing, but the healing of everyone whose life intersects with yours. In 2025, as our world faces unprecedented challenges and countless people struggle with despair, depression, and disconnection, we need more stories like Marcus and Luna's. We need more people who understand that consciousness survives death, that love creates miracles, and that every ending contains the seeds of a new beginning more beautiful than anything we can imagine. Today, right now, Your departed loved ones are sending you everything you need to not just survive your grief, but to transform it into a superpower for healing others. Listen with your heart. Watch for the signs. Trust the impossible. And remember that some love stories are so powerful they change the world, one miracle at a time.